Introducing Intellivision, the new home video system from Mattel Electronics. Two components, each sold separately. Start with the master component, available now for super games like NFL football. To pass.
Go for it, Dad.
Hello everyone, it's Kevin, and after the response to my Atari 2600 video, a lot of you told me I needed to check out the Intellivision. Now, I'll be honest. Before reading your comments, I mostly knew the Intellivision as the one with the weird controller. You know the one. The controller that looks less like a game controller and more like something you'd use to call a meeting in an office building. But after spending time with the system, I started to understand why so many of you were recommending it. Because unlike the Atari 2600, which often relied on simplicity, the Intellivision was trying to do something bigger. So today, we're looking at 10 Intellivision games that I'm trying for the first time. No nostalgia, no childhood memories, just me seeing if these games can still be fun over 40 years later. Let's power on. But before we get into the games, let's talk about the Intellivision itself. Released in 1979 by Mattel, the Intellivision was designed to compete directly with the Atari 2600. And on paper, it absolutely crushed it. The Intellivision had better graphics, more colors, more detailed sprites, better sound, and generally felt like a more advanced machine. When you look at the arcade ports on both systems, it's usually pretty obvious which one had more horsepower. But here's the thing. Being more powerful doesn't automatically mean you're winning. The Atari 2600 had a huge head start. It had a massive game library, lower prices, and by the time the Intellivision was really getting momentum, Atari already had a huge chunk of the market. It's kind of the same story we've seen throughout gaming history. The technically stronger system doesn't always come out on top. Now, where the Intellivision gets controversial is the controller. You've got a number pad, side buttons, and a directional disc instead of a joystick. And when I first saw it, I thought that there was no way this thing was going to be usable. And that's why I emulated. No, I'm kidding, I just can't afford the system.
Kevin, it's a phone attached to a wire. Even I can't use it for games.
Yeah, for once I agree with you. Some say you can learn and adapt to it, but I'll just take your word for it. Would I take it over an NES controller, or even a ColecoVision controller? Absolutely not. Let's just get into the games. Starting things off is a game that I was already familiar with. Frogger is a game that I actually played on the 2600 not too long ago, so I was curious to see how the Intellivision version stacked up. The first thing I noticed was how much closer this feels to the arcade game. The graphics are more detailed, the sound is noticeably better, and it just feels a little smoother overall. The gameplay itself is still the classic Frogger we all know and love. Cross the road, cross the river, and try not to become someone's dinner. If you've only played the 2600 version, this is definitely a step up. It's not reinventing Frogger, because it doesn't really need to. It simply gives you a more polished version of a great game. My only gripe with it is that it's just a smidgen less snappier than the 2600 version. Beauty and the Beast? Disney on the Intellivision? Even Atari couldn't pull this off. Oh wait, it's not that Beauty and the Beast. Well, at least the story in the manual is hilarious. This one caught me completely off guard. At first glance it looks strange. Actually, the more I played it, the stranger it looked. But underneath that weird presentation is a really fun arcade-style game. You're trying to climb while avoiding obstacles and enemies, and there's a surprising amount of tension once things speed up. It's definitely one of the more unique games on the system, and this one also has music. And honestly, sometimes a game this unique is memorable. I could get used to this. Wow, this one actually has an intro. This actually wasn't my first time with Bump and Jump either. I previously played it on the ColecoVision, and I really enjoyed it there, so I was interested to see how the Intellivision handled it. Thankfully, it's still a lot of fun. The gameplay is just as addictive. You're weaving through traffic before eventually launching your car onto the vehicles ahead of you, which, admittedly, is probably not something your insurance company would recommend. While I'd still probably give the edge to the ColecoVision, visually the Intellivision does a really respectable job. More importantly, it keeps that fast-paced arcade feeling that makes the game feel so enjoyable. My only issue with this game is that I have a harder time knocking people off in this one. Sometimes a good game is just a good game though, regardless of the system it's on. Lock and Chase is an interesting one. At first this looks like another Pac-Man clone, and then you start using the doors. Suddenly you're trapping enemies, planning routes, and thinking ahead simply instead of just running away. That's what makes this one stand out. It takes a familiar concept and adds enough strategy to make it feel different. It's one of those games where I started playing for footage, and ended up playing longer than necessary. This one is quite a bit harder than Pac-Man though, if that's what you're looking for. Tron Deadly Discs. This might be the coolest game on the system. It's not necessarily the best game on the system, but definitely the coolest. I had a hard time with this one though because it requires the keypad, but when it works, you're throwing discs, which looks like it's satisfying, dodging attacks, again pretty satisfying, and everything just has a nice style. The Tron license helps of course, but even without it, this is simply a creative and fun action game. Just try to play it on actual hardware instead of emulation, and you'll be okay. Now here's the premise of Thin Ice. This is one of those games that's easy to understand immediately. It even gives you a tutorial as the title is drawn out on the start screen, which is really creative. You're skating around, carving up the ice, avoiding enemies, and trying not to get yourself trapped. It's a simple concept, it has great execution, and this one also has music. I love it. I could easily see someone discovering this for the first time today and enjoying it. The best retro games usually have that quality. You don't need a history lesson to understand why it's fun, but I will say that seal is a jerk. Nightstalker is pretty interesting. The atmosphere here is fantastic. In this one you're exploring rooms, collecting weapons, avoiding robots, and trying to survive. The only problem I had though, is that this one requires the use of the keypad, so I couldn't get very far. But I do see what it was going for. It almost feels like an early prototype of ideas that we would see expanded on years later. For a game from this era, it's remarkably tense. And when retro games can still create tension decades later, that's pretty impressive. I know BurgerTime is considered one of Intellivision's biggest classics, but I'm gonna be honest here. I also played BurgerTime on the 2600, and I got a lot of flack for it because it just didn't click with me. I loved the idea. Building burgers while avoiding enemies is a unique concept, and I can absolutely see why it became such a popular arcade game. But I found the controls and movement frustrating enough that I wasn't having nearly as much fun as I wanted to. Now, on the Intellivision version, it is definitely improved. It looks better, it plays closer to the arcade, and overall feels like this version has the mechanics that it deserves. Even so, BurgerTime still isn't one of my personal favorites. I can respect what it was trying to do, but compared to the other games on this list, it just wasn't the one that kept me coming back for one more. Wait, the chef's name is Peter Pepper? That's awesome. Shark. This may be the game that surprised me the most. You start off as a small fish, and you go around eating smaller fish. But then you also have to avoid larger fish. Then eventually you grow. Simple, it's the circle of life. And somehow it's incredibly addictive. The concept feels modern enough that I could see an indie developer releasing something similar today. It's approachable, easy to understand, and fun almost immediately. It also has awesome music, and it plays when you die. That is a winning combination. Just make sure you be careful when chasing the shark's tail. That's some life advice for you all. I love the manual for Astro Smash. Just like Frogger, I played this on the 2600 and enjoyed it a lot. If I had to recommend one Intellivision game to someone who's never played the system before, this would probably be it. Everything just clicks the second you play it. The controls feel good, the action starts immediately, the difficulty ramps up naturally, and it nails that classic one more try feeling. It also feels kind of momentum based, which is probably why I kept playing it longer than I planned. It's just super addictive, simple as that. For a system that's over 40 years old, to have a game like this is pretty impressive. Going into this video, I expected to respect the Intellivision more than I enjoyed it. Instead, I ended up doing both. The controller is still weird, don't get me wrong. The graphics are obviously dated, and some games haven't aged well, but the best Intellivision games reminded me of something I kept discovering with these older consoles. Good gameplay survives. It doesn't matter how old the hardware is. If the game is fun, it's fun. And while the Atari 2600 surprised me with how much fun you could have using simple ideas, the Intellivision surprised me by showing just how ambitious Mattel and the developers already were in the early 80s. Now I'm curious, what Intellivision games would make your list? Let me know in the comments. I think it's time for me to stop disking around and power off. And that's a wrap. It is time to reboot. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the other side.